Matt DiFrancesco, welcome to Succession Stories. I'm glad you're with me today.
Oh, glad to be on, Laura. I know we had fun on my podcast, so I'm looking to have some more fun with you.
We did. And Matt, your show, Your Business, Your Life podcast is a great show. You're really doing an
Thanks.
awesome job educating business owners. And I know you're going to do the same thing today.
No.
You and I have a passion for working with businesses
Hmm.
proactively to
Yes.
help them in this next phase of their entrepreneurial path, which
Right.
is succession and transition planning.
Right.
Why don't we start with you just telling a little bit about yourself and the origin
Mhm.
story of High Life Financial?
High lift.
Excuse me,
Yes.
High Lift.
High lift.
High
That's what's
Lift
behind me.
Financial.
Yes,
That is what's
exactly.
behind you.
So, well, I'll give you the short version because it can go. But I got yeah, I did a number of things, in my life, and I got into financial services when I was in my 40s and my early 40s, and when I got into, I really didn't know what I was getting into, to be honest with you. I mean, I was like, I was looking at businesses but I was still a little scared. And I thought financial services would be, well, it's kind of like you have your own business, but you've got a big firm that's backing you. And so, and I had a branch manager that he said, after about 6 months we were talking, and he said, oh, well, my dad's an attorney, my father-in-law's attorney. He's like, oh, these guys, they'll bring all kinds of business. It's a home run for you. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So I get into the business and I go to my first day of production. And I realize there's no money that's there. There's no money in my family. I don't have any rich friends, which can be a disaster in financial services. So I knew municipal bonds and I learned 401ks. So that's basically how I started building my practice. Was I'd spend all day calling businesses, family businesses, do you have a retirement plan? Do you understand the tax benefits of it? Oh, you do have a retirement plan. When's the last time you had it reviewed? You have a fiduciary responsibility to do this. And then at night, I'd call physicians and sell them UPMC AA rated bonds at 5.5%. So that's pretty much what my practice was. So I developed kind of this core group of these 401k clients that were family businesses. Then they became personal clients, and then started getting in more depth because I've developed pretty extensive networks, and I started to see some of the other problems that we're having within the businesses. And I was taking more of a consultative role with these, kind of a concierge, as I called it. So I was almost like their financial point person. And then I could either solve a problem or get them to somebody and help coordinate the solution. And it didn't mix well with the big firms. So 10 years ago, I started my own firm, and I was doing this consultative work with family businesses. And as we all know, the majority of business, 60% of family businesses are owned by baby boomers. All right. And they're all getting to be my age, and they're all kind of going, okay, what's the rest of my life look like? And I got this client. I met him on an airplane. He had a collision shop. Started working with him, and we started doing family transition. This is before, I mean, I was kind of shooting from the hip at this. I didn't have any training. I was just going at it. And we had some success. And then he introduced me to another one. And then I was looking at how do I really create a broader voice in a narrow market. And I started researching the collision industry, and the demographic, it was like perfect. I tell my clients that I didn't find the collision industry, it kind of found me. So I started looking, and there's 40,000 collision shops in the country. 70% of them are family owned. 12,000 of those are doing $1 million a year and higher in revenue with about 40% gross margin. So cash flow was good. And I liked the people. They were family oriented. They're community oriented. They weren't country clubbers. Sorry, I'm just not a country clubber. I've just never been that way. We were talking about that offline here. So, but
Because I'm
anyway,
a country
yeah,
clubber. So.
that's right. Yeah, exactly. So, but I mean, but yeah, they like to hunt, fish, ride their motorcycles, race cars, that kind of stuff. And I just like the people. So I decided to get into this niche. And then, through the years, I was doing more and more of this exit planning. I found some training through a company called Business Enterprise Institute. And I got what's called the CEXP, Certified Exit Planner designation. And that's basically where I've been focusing my attention, is really helping business owners to create transition plans, not and a lot of times not just even immediate plans, but even 10 years out, helping them to build value so when that inevitable time comes, we can have a successful exit.
So these collision shop owners are the folks that would, if you can see behind you, you're not literally sitting in the
Yes,
collision
that
shop.
is a backdrop.
But if people are on YouTube and see that, they might wonder, oh, wow,
Right.
okay. So let's talk about when owners are thinking about retirement or selling the business to someone, because as we all know, 100% of us are going to leave our company one day, or many of us have not planned for that. When they come to you, typically, are they like, hey, I got to do something tomorrow? Or are they giving you a little bit of a time frame, maybe a couple of years, 5 years? What do you see most often?
So I most of them I see want to exit anywhere between immediate and 5 years. And 5 years is an interesting number because if you talk to most business owners, this, and it's the same is true in the collision industry. If you're talking to an owner said, when do you want to exit? What's the typical answer? It's 5 years, right?
Right.
All right. Why is it 5 years? Because 5 years is a time frame that seems long enough that they can plan, but short enough that they can see the end of the horizon. The problem is that because they don't have a plan, this becomes the rolling 5-year plan. Right.
Right.
And they just keep, in 5 years, and then the next 5 years, and the next 5 years. And so they never really get a plan in place because they don't have any guidance and they don't know where to go with that. So that's typically where I see most of my clients coming in. I'm really trying to get more messaging out now that you really need to be plan every move that you make in your business, even if you're 10, 15 years out, should have your succession in mind. Because I think if you're doing all the right things, it's going to make your transition much easier, and you're also going to raise value in the business.
I want to talk about hard conversations.
Let's
talk about hard conversations with owners and their kids. You've been so gracious to read my book, and we had a good conversation on your show about the concept of the buyer, right? Who are the different kinds of buyers? And in your industry, what is most common? Is it family or is it third party?
It's right now, I would say what's on the radar is third party. And a lot of it's because, most shop owners have no idea even how to do an insider transfer. Okay. So you're seeing a lot of consolidation in the collision industry. You've got the big consolidators that are buying. You're now starting to see more private equity that's coming in with money because they're seeing the cash flows, and the cash flows can be very good in the collision industry. But what's actually happening now is because of a lot of the messaging and a lot of the partners and circles of influence within the industry that I work with, like the messaging, and they're starting to talk about, hey, have you thought about family transitions? Have you thought about key employee transitions? And that's how a lot of my business is coming to me. So typically I'm working more on the insider transition with them. We always want to look at a plan B, and that's where I bring somebody like you as the M&A specialist to do that. We always want to have that plan B. And, and then sometimes we find out that, a family member or key employees don't want it. And then we have to do the third party. So, but I think there's more and more people are now starting to understand that, hey, we can successfully do it. It's a lot more complicated than doing the third party transfer. But
yeah,
I think it could be more rewarding.
Why is it complicated?
There's this thing called family relations and emotions.
Just gets in the way sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah, all the time. And it's really, that's probably the biggest challenge that I run into is the family dynamics. So it's actually interesting. Most collision shop owners grew up in the bit. They started when they were probably teenagers. Maybe they were even sweeping floors, sweeping the shop floors. And then they build up, they become technicians, they learn how to work on cars, and they either buy the shop from the previous owner, or they start their own shop, and they've kind of built this thing up. And all of a sudden, then they're having kids, and the kids are getting older and they're becoming adults, and it's kind of naturally assumed that, oh, you're just going to come into the business. And they come into the business, and It's really interesting because I'll start talking with the family members and especially the kids, and the kids will be like, dad doesn't listen to me. I don't know what, it's, I have these great ideas, and, we're always banging heads. And I tell them, I said, look, I said, what you don't understand is that this shop is, they've birthed this. This is something they've built from the ground up. All right. It is like a child. It is as much a child to them as you are. Okay. You have to respect it that way too. Okay. Because that's kind of their psychology. And I think once I start to get them to understand that, now they start to get a little more understanding on why there's some of the conflict, and then it would kind of help them to navigate with the parents. And I also have to talk to the parents. Okay, I've explained this to them, but you've also got to be a little more understanding of where they're coming from too. I think the second big problem is that a lot of owners think that their kids have learned the business through osmosis. So they go out and they kind of throw them to the wolves, figuring, this. I mean, you've been seeing me do this all this life. Well, seeing is different than doing, right? You're smiling because you know exactly where I'm coming from.
I've heard
right?
this challenge before.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the biggest challenges, is trying to navigate all of that, and then just trying to figure out, like, what does this all mean? If the kids take it over, what does mom and dad want to do? I tell my shop owners all the time, you can take the boy out of the shop, but you can't take the shop out of the boy. And some of them are struggling. They start hanging on because I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And that's really the first step that I try to do with them, is help them to start creating a vision. And you illustrate this beautifully in your book about creating a vision for what you want your life to look like post business, or maybe even just going forward. Maybe you don't completely sell the business, or maybe you're still involved in an indirect way, but what do you want your business to look like? And I use the analogy, putting the plan together is like putting pieces of the puzzle. Okay. We're putting a puzzle together, but if you don't see the picture on the box top, it's really hard to put the picture together.
Hard to let go. You just said it. I mean, people may
Mm-hmm.
want Junior to take over. They're
Right.
excited about Junior taking over. They think Junior's ready, and Junior's saying they want it. But
Right.
now the founder or the owner is not letting go. What do we do in that situation?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think again that comes down to where the vision is. So one of my best clients, he's got a very, very successful shop. He had his two sons that were in the business. All right. Started, and he had a key guy that was really vital to the operation. And the key guy was just, he's top notch. Okay. Young kid. He was in his mid-20s, just ambitious. My client had kind of taken him under his wing as like another son. So anyway, so I had this dynamic going on with the two sons and then this key guy, and they all got along, but they didn't understand why the dad was kind of embracing the key guy more than them, because and it was because he was just getting it quicker. Okay. They kind of still grew up with the entitlement mentality that they had it. So just a lot of other family issues that were going on. We finally had to end up having to, we sent actually the younger son, had him leave the business for a little bit. Older son just didn't have a passion for it. Eventually the younger son came back. The older son's now has left the business, and it's actually been a good thing, because we actually found that he wasn't even suited for that business, but I was suited for, he loves construction. So we're actually in the process of creating a new company under the family umbrella for him to be able to run. And this is how we start to create family legacies. But I think the key thing was, I finally sat down with the dad. He came to me one day. I was doing this seminar on creating your ideal life in business. And he called me the day after. He says, hey, can I get together with you? And I said, yeah, sure. And he says, can you give me like 3 hours? And I'm like, all right. So we meet in this coffee shop in this private room, and he starts just pouring out his guts about his marriage is falling apart. The relationship with his kids is terrible. I don't know where to go, yada, yada, yada. And I kind of have a tell him my story. I get him, doing some things. And all of a sudden he has this epiphany, and he realizes, I don't want to leave the business. But what I want to be is, I want to be the 50,000-foot guy that develops culture. I want to develop people. And so that's where the transition's going, where the younger son and the key guy are going to be the big operations guys. We're starting to work on creating, a stay bonuses plan that will include stock to get them ownership in it. But what he wants to do is develop the culture of the business and his people. And this guy's got average tenure, 15 years. That's unheard of in the collision industry.
Wow. That's a great story. What can you expand on the stay bonus with the stock a little bit? Is that a phantom stock plan you're talking about?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, so basically what we're doing is as we're building the business and building value, and as cash flow increases, we're basically just taking a portion of that, a portion of the excess cash flow. All right. Basically bonusing this younger son and the key guy with, and that's going to purchase phantom stock that will eventually, depending on where it's going to go, it may just be phantom stock, but probably at some point in the business continuity plan that will convert to true stock with voting shares and all that. So that's where it's going right now.
Gotcha. Let's talk about key person transactions, management team or supervisors who are interested in buying the business. Because I think this is common in not just collision shops, but other, whether it's manufacturing or could be a service business. What are some of the dynamics there where you see that it's a successful case study? Do you have any examples to share?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's two different ones I'm thinking of. The one is we're working on it right now, where the gentleman has again a nice size shop, no kids, all right, but he's got this key guy, and that's where we're looking to have the transition. And we've talked to the key guy. He's interested in taking over ownership, so we're looking to develop a plan for him to be able to do that. So a lot of times, if there's not kids, or there's another one guy, and we're just kind of getting started. We're just talking about this right now, but he's got 3 successful shops, and he came to me and he says, "Look," he goes, "I know I could sell to a consolidator, and I get top dollar for it." He goes, "But my kids aren't interested in the business, but my employees, I want to make sure they're taken care of." And so we're actually now just exploring ESOP options for him. So again, with 3 shops, and they're very successful shops right now, his cash flow looks good that we can successfully do something like that. So I think in most of the situations, I guess to answer your question, Laura, there's no kids, or you have kids that aren't interested in the business, but you have good employees that would be interested in taking over.
Yeah. So the financing is really a key part. ESOP is a sale to the ESOP.
Correct.
Do you have any experience with the client where they were selling to an individual person and that person was seeking an SBA loan, or they were doing seller financing or something like that?
Yeah, I try to avoid the seller financing with those. I mean, if that's going to be the option or the best option, that's okay. Typically, what we do is with the bonus program, again, build value, increase cash flow, and then utilize that for the bonuses for them to purchase stock to a point where they can get 20 to 30%, then be able to go to get the SBA loan. That's again contingent that the owner wants to fully exit. Okay. If he doesn't, then maybe it's they keep a portion of it. There's been actually there's one situation that I ran into where we sold the business to the son, but we created we created a C corp and formed a board of directors, and Dad's on the board of directors as chairman of the board. And now, but it's interesting because this shop's in Detroit. He's living in Cocoa Beach. All right. And he just like helps out. Like they had to do a census. So he was doing the census for the dad, and he gets paid for it. So it's like he's living his life. He can still have his fingers in it, and it works out great.
Yeah, that's good. Have you had any situations with clients where they had a tough conversation with Junior, right? Where they had to tell Junior that he or she is not qualified to take over, that they weren't the right fit?
Yeah, that was actually the first example that I gave, and the older son was like that, and I could tell immediately that it was that he doesn't want to be here. His heart's not in it, and the owner moved him around, tried him. He was working marketing and sales, and then he was doing estimating, and then he had moved him to production manager, but his heart was just never in it. And finally, I had to have a sit down with the owner, and I said, "Look, you can tell his heart's not in this. I said, what if we could find an option, something that he could be happy doing? And again, one thing I like to do is and again, a lot of this is for liability reasons, is create separate entities. So, I always like the real estate to be a separate entity for the owner. Like in a collision shop, a lot of times they might have mechanical repair too that's there. Creating all these different separate entities. First off, it helps from an estate planning standpoint. Second, it helps from cash flow. But again, if you have a family, like in this kid's case, he found he loved construction. So we're in the process now of creating this construction company that's just going to be part of the family umbrella, as I call it. All right. And so it's still part of the family, and it works into this idea of family legacy, which that's really, I guess, if my ultimate goal, it's really about creating family legacies and multi-generational wealth. And how can we find spots for everybody in the family? And it doesn't necessarily have to be in the core business.
Yeah, family legacy is a great topic and so important. It's the legacy of the business, and then for the business owner, it's their own legacy and what's important to them too. It's good to get them to articulate that, I think, as part of their goals.
Yeah, it really is. And it's funny because, like I said, there's some mad money that's being thrown out there in the M&A space, but you've got to look at not just the money. You've got to look at what your value-based goals are too. And, I'll start talking to a lot of these owners about, well, what about your employees? What about your community? You sponsor the local Little League team. Doesn't that mean something? And, it's funny, they start thinking about it. It's like, yeah. And realizing that, you sell to a consolidator or a smaller MSO or, a private equity firm, you might lose that community aspect. And I think what I'm passionate about, especially with family businesses and with collision, a family-owned collision shops, is that who's going to be more vested in the community, a large corporation or the family business that grew up there and raised their families there.
What do you think are key success factors that need to be in play for an owner to exit without regrets?
Without regrets, first off, clarity of vision. And you talk about that. I mean, just like I said, that's it. If you read her book, start there. I mean, that's just, you really got to have a clarity of vision, what you want, and not just from money standpoint. I mean, that's one thing, it's funny when you're interviewing, one of the key questions they have is, well, what's their income number? But I think you've got to go deeper than that, what that income, but need to help them create a picture of what they want their life to look like. And that's really, I think that's a big goal because, money's money, but if we don't have, we got to have all the money in the world, but if we don't have a fulfillment, or if we're not fulfilling our core values, we're going to be empty. And that really doesn't serve us in any way. So I think it's really kind of defining those core values that they have to help them transition. And then what was the rest of the question?
Yeah, no, to
I got
exit without regrets.
I
And it's hard. It's to exit without regret. It can be the things that we do. Then maybe we said, oh, we would have done it differently, or things we didn't do.
Yeah. And I think it's creating a vision, and then, identifying who the players are and setting expectations too, that, okay, you want your kids to take this over, but maybe they say they do now. And maybe all of a sudden, as the process starts going, it's like, well, wait a second, I don't know if I want all of this. I tell a lot of my guys, it's funny, because all of them work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And we're all baby boomers. And I tell them, I said, you guys got to understand, we wear that as a badge of honor. Like, yeah, look, I grind it out. Gen X and the millennials don't want to do that. They don't want to do that. So then how can we structure it in a way that, that they can still fulfill their goals, still make sure that the business thrives? And in a lot of cases, it is multiple people ownership. Maybe the kids have a core of the ownership, but we also give some ownership to key employees that have skin in the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love to ask people if they have a favorite quote, something about entrepreneurship, something that inspires them. Is there anything that you'd like to share, Matt?
Oh boy, I got a ton of one-liners. Now you put me on the spot. I'm drawing a blank, but I think one of the key ones, and it comes from scripture, is a people without vision will perish. And I think that's just so true in life. If you do not have a vision, of what you want your life and business to look like, I mean, you're going to be dead in the water. You're just going to be, you're going to be paddling upstream without a paddle. Okay. So I think that's a key one, because that's what I've kind of learned as I've been kind of doing, getting into deeper and deeper into exit planning, is that you've really almost got to start with that part. And that's hard sometimes because they want to know the mechanics. I want to know how this thing's going to work. Well, you don't know, you can't, what's Stephen Covey say? Begin with the end in mind, right?
Absolutely.
I think you quote that, right?
I do. I love that
Yeah.
quote. I think it's important.
Yeah.
So this is the
So
drop the mic question.
okay.
What's one thing that you recommend a business owner start to do in the next year to be better prepared for their transition?
A business continuity plan. I'm telling you, it's amazing to me. When I was studying for my CEXP exam, I'm going through business continuity, and all of a sudden I'm going, wow, I don't even have one. And that was the first thing I did. I started putting my own business continuity plan in, because, we all think we're going to live forever. And the worst thing that can shake up an exit plan is death or disability. And it's actually interesting, because I was mentioning to you about, so I belong to the Business Enterprise Institute, BEI, and they have their kind of 7-step process. And number 6 is business continuity. And I'm always like, nope, we're going right to the top on that one. And that's usually where I start all of my plans. It's a personal financial plan, personal vision statement, and business continuity. And that's usually the starting point for all of them, because I haven't run into one shopper that has a continuity plan.
And that's the emergency plan, right? Something we can't control.
Right.
If we're disabled or we're passing away, and essentially not able to serve in our business. And we need to protect the business. We need to protect our employees. So that's business continuity, emergency plan, different names for it,
right.
Contingency plan, which is something in parallel to a strategic business transition plan. So I just want to acknowledge that. I think you're spot on. It's really important.
And Matt, it kind of it will actually lead into that, that's kind of the framework that then you can build the rest of the exit strategy off of.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've covered a lot of ground, but I'll leave something very open-ended. Is there anything that we didn't talk about today that you want to mention?
Boy, I mean, there's so many directions I can go with this. I mean, I think, I think the biggest thing, and again, like my core business, and we talked about this, my core business is financial services, but my real passion is about helping families to create, I always say, aligning businesses and families for multi-generational wealth. And I think the key is to realize, first off, you need somebody to coordinate that plan, and you need somebody who is well connected with other advisors. So like, Laurie, you do M&A. I don't do M&A, but I'm connected with you. So having somebody who's good, qualified, that you can trust. And, you need the good business attorneys, you need the good CPAs, sometimes business coaches, life coaches, therapists, especially in these family dynamics.
That's right.
These are, insurance brokers, investment bankers. You need to have somebody, a point person, but that has a good team about them. And I think that's probably the most important team, because I think most shop owners try to go it alone, and that's where they drop the ball.
Gotcha. Matt, you've covered a lot today. Thank you so much for coming on. If people want to follow up with you, learn more, what's a good way to get in touch?
The best way to get in touch, and I always offer this, I will give anybody 30 minutes of my time, free, no cost, no obligation, consultation. You can go to my website, HighLiftFinancial.com. And up at the top on the home screen, you'll see a Let's Chat. You can click on there, get on my calendar. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody. And this is the one thing, because I want to make sure that I'm working with the right people, and the people that I want to work with. And there's sometimes I get people that just, I really can't help. One thing I always promise is, even if I can't help you, I promise you I'll get you pointed in the right direction. I mean, I want to provide value to anybody I talk to. So, I mean, there is no obligation, but again, that's the best thing to do is talk, check in, let me know, we can talk about your situation and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Awesome. Matt, thank you so much for being with me on Succession Stories. Appreciate you.
No problem. Appreciate you too, Laura. Thank you very much.
Listeners, be sure to follow Succession Stories in your favorite podcast player on YouTube and leave us a review. 5 stars helps the show get discovered. To learn more about maximizing the value of your business and planning for transition, sign up for our newsletter and book a call with me at thebusinesstransitionsherpa.com. Join us next time on Succession Stories for more insights from transition to transaction.